Joining us now, Pete Hegseth. He's the former chief executive operator of Concerned Veterans for America. He's now a Fox News contributor. He is a veteran of a number of theaters, if you will, and one of the toughest guys you'll ever meet. Also a great guy. And he's just wrote a new book, In the Arena, of which I love the title. I got into some of it, and it's inspiring because you start reading this thing and you're like, man, I got to get off the sidelines and in the game. Pete, good to have you with us, man.
John, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been way too long.
Indeed.
I want to get right to this because I've heard you speak, Pete, when you were with CVA, as you know, on tour so many times. You're a great speaker and very motivational, and you really took CVA and made it into a powerhouse, not only in Virginia, but all over the United States right now. What inspired the book?
What inspired the book was to exactly what you said coming into this: remind people, inspire people, motivate people to stay in what is a very difficult, dicey arena. It's never easy. You're going to fail. You're going to fail again. There's going to be resistance, whether it's from the status quo or enemies on the battlefield or people with different priorities here at home. And what Roosevelt says in the speech, that comes from a Roosevelt speech, a quote that I carried around with me in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Guantanamo Bay. It's not the critic who counts. It's the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by blood and sweat and dust, who strives valiantly for worthy causes. And I always ask myself, am I striving valiantly? Am I fighting for a worthy cause? Am I in the arena? And I want everyone to reflect on that. And rather than write a book about my life, the book's not a biography, and it's also not about Teddy Roosevelt's life. As a conservative, I'm quite aware of his descent into progressivism. It's not about his entire lasting legacy. It uses a speech that he gave in 1910 that contains that quote. The speech is called Citizenship in a Republic, and it was sort of un-PC before there even was PC. It's all the basic building blocks of free societies and what it requires of their citizens to keep them free, keep a great republic great. And so I lay out kind of what he argues and how it's applicable today. You know, the truths of this nation are timeless. They were as true in 240 years ago when our founders laid out the Declaration and the Constitution as they were in 1910 when Roosevelt spoke, as they are today. So I want to remind people of what a special country we have and encourage them to get in the arena and fight for it.
Well, when you talk about getting into the arena, a big part of your book is like you just got to get off the sidelines and get moving. A lot of us, Pete, feel right now that what can they do? They see, I have this saying, they see their country circling the drain in so many areas, economically, militarily, all over the world. There seems to be no way out because Obama continues to do things that drive many of us bananas. But let's get to your own view here. How do you see the future? How do we get out of this mess, Pete?
Well, okay, great question, and I feel the same way. I see the same thing. And, you know, Roosevelt in the speech warned about the same kind of leader. He talked about a citizen of the world, and that's what Obama is. He's tried to fundamentally transform us at home, and his allegiance is more to international or amorphous ideas of humanity than he is to America and American citizenship. What can we do? The first thing we can do, and Roosevelt talks about this, what I love about the speech, is we can affect our sphere of influence. We can hold our own. We can raise good families. We can watchdog the curriculum in our local schools. We can raise kids and others that are willing to fight and stand for things and demonstrate that ourselves, have large patriotic families, live lives of character and faith. And you know, we oftentimes get so frustrated, and I'm the same way, about what's going on in our nation, the decimation of our military, our foreign policies falling apart, our allies don't trust us, our enemies are surging, our debt is rising. I mean, it's enough to drive you crazy. And we need to affect those things and be a part of those conversations. But the first thing we need to do is look around our own lives and the things we can affect. And are we doing everything we can to contribute to raising good citizens, making sure they're educated and informed and disciplined, that we're teaching grittiness and toughness and the civic virtues that are required. We've gone so soft as a society, bike helmets and ribbons and fifth-place trophies, and that infects the minds of our youth. And this is stuff we forget about. We just say, well, yeah, let them play on their Xbox all day and they'll magically be okay. That's not true.
That's right.
They may not turn out to be citizens prepared to perpetuate this republic. And so there's some hard truths. We always need to look in our own mirror first and figure out whether we're doing enough. And then we can turn around and fight for the larger causes that we all believe in.
You've absolutely nailed it. It's those fifth-place trophies that really get me. Pete, let's get to this Turkey situation right now. Nobody knows more about this. I've always said this. This is why I always love having you on, because other people talk, and you've actually been fighting in these places and leading men. Turkey has got 7,000 troops occupying a third of the island of Cyprus. Now they're lobbying NATO to bring Cyprus into NATO, which has no strategic bearing on anything as far as I can tell internationally, in order to justify their occupation of one third of the island of Cyprus. What's the deal here?
The deal here is that Turkey is throwing another wrench into the equation, and many of it is a distraction, but it's also taking advantage of a moment in time in which, in many ways, our administration is paralyzed. And NATO membership has always been a precarious situation as it pertains to Turkey, and they're in or are they out? Are they true allies? Are they not? Are they strategically aligned, like you said? And there's already plenty of questions that have been raised in this presidential about the future utility of NATO. So imagine a quasi-NATO country holding on to terrain and then wanting to declare it a part of NATO that has no value to NATO, which right now it's uncertain what NATO's overall mission is. It all creates this bundle of uncertainty that leads to, for this administration, that usually leads to gridlock. It means they don't really act. It means if they do act, it's on the margins. And so you get de facto outcomes. Just like you get de facto Crimea for the Russians, you get de facto Soviet and Iranian involvement in Syria, you get Iranian involvement in Iraq. Because America doesn't act decisively, you get these de facto outcomes. And we like to talk about international agreements and peace talks and all those nice things that we talk about in Ivory Towers. But it ultimately comes down to boots on the ground and guys with guns, and they set the terms. And if we're unwilling, if our threats and red lines have proved to be baseless, then those who have different interests than ours are taking advantage of that moment. And I think that's why, on the Republican side, multiple candidates have resonated with, and Donald Trump as well, with people who want a president with a gut, with a little bit of grit and a recognition. But still, it's still unclear how even some of those candidates would act also. So yeah, it's a move. I wake up every morning and we see new moves like this, and it reminds me that history's not over. And a lot of people in Western Europe and the United States want to act as if what we have here is inevitable, or the lines that have been drawn are inevitable. They're not. And without America leading in the world, it's just going to get more chaotic.
No question. Pete, let's get to your friends, retired military, and you have many of them. You have a very deep network. We now have a Republican presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. No military experience, no government experience. When you talk to some of your senior veteran friends, officers, retired, and they look at Trump as a potential commander-in-chief, what are they saying?
You're getting mixed views. You're getting some who are excited about the bravado and the belief in America and the talk about restoring our military and taking care of our veterans and are very attracted to that. You get others that hear, that they will follow my orders no matter what. And we will crush ISIS, except no real defined plan yet to say what that looks like. So I think it, like the overall electorate, and especially amongst conservatives and Republicans within the military, which is the overwhelming majority of the military, you have an honest split of people that I've talked to. Although there's no doubt, I've seen a recent survey from the Military Times that it's 2-1 Trump over Clinton. So there's definitely a preference there. I do think, we'll see whether Clinton litigates his she can't litigate his 4 deferments, educational deferments, and 1 medical deferment from military service from Vietnam. I mean, that would bug a lot of guys or gals in uniform. I think in this cycle, between a choice in him and Hillary, it's a wash. And then you've got the comments he made about John McCain and POWs. You've got, where has the money gone that he supposedly raised for veterans? How he answers all of those questions, I think, will go a long way in reassuring or sending a signal to vets in the military. But rhetorically, he talks a lot about rebuilding the military. He talks about taking care of veterans, but he's also talked about maybe not spending more on defense spending, which can make it difficult to rebuild. And he's also been ambiguous about what his plans would be to fix the VA healthcare system. So a mixed bag, and we've heard multiple things, but I think there's no doubt that at this point, there are a lot of people in the military that would see Trump as a great contrast to what they've had with Barack Obama.
The military deferments that Trump had, there were 4 of them to get that were the reason he didn't serve in Vietnam. I want to say it in the politically correct way because I don't know all the facts, but
Sure.
they were deferments and they precluded him from either being drafted or serving in Vietnam. I'm with you. I think that turns into a campaign issue. It hasn't on the Republican side, but I think it will. What type of an impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, I think most people don't know that. It wasn't just for educational deferments. It was also a 5th medical deferment for bone spurs, which, hey, I'm sure bone spurs hurt, but I know you and I both know guys who have pushed through a lot more than that because they were dedicated to service for country. So it is not widely or well known. It was discussed actually at my caucus in Minnesota when I was at the Republican caucus a month and a half ago, and people were surprised, and I think it changed in some ways their impression of him. You could conceive of a scenario where Hillary Clinton, what do they try to do in campaigns? They usually try to attack your adversary's strength. And I think the strength of Donald Trump is that he's a tough guy, he's a leader, he's a fighter. And if I'm the Hillary camp, that type of stuff is not widely known, and I think could be. You got to do it in a way that doesn't disparage anyone who, didn't. It doesn't disparage everyone who didn't serve in Vietnam, because there are a lot of people that had reasons why they could or couldn't. But in his case, it looks to be a little bit more than that. So they could also use that to feed into kind of the child of privilege narrative, which I'm sure they will try, which they try against every Republican. So. And it could have more effect on military than we think. But then, what Donald Trump has going in his favor?
What?
He's running against what is perceived as one of the most anti-military families in the Clintons, especially Hillary Clinton, that the military has seen. So There's not a lot of love for Hillary, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So by default, I think you'll see a lot of Donald Trump support.
Right, because the alternative is worse. Pete, we got 2 minutes, and you got to buy Pete's book. I'm telling you, In the Arena, it's just a great read. Pete, I got 2 minutes. If you were advising a President Trump, and he called you in and he said, look, how do I just eradicate ISIS? What would you tell him?
What I would tell him is we've got to untie the hands of our warfighters. We've got to first tell the American people not what exactly we're going to do on the battlefield, but prepare them for a fight. I would say we're going to unleash hell on Raqqa and their capital and all the targets that we have that we're unwilling to hit for fear of civilian casualties. We're going to hit, not because we want to hit civilian casualties, but because we understand what's at stake. I would send more troops, boots on the ground, to advise and assist. And then I would really put the screws to our so-called allies and say now is a put-up or shut-up moment. Either join the On the Boots coalition, or you're going to see very real changes in our relationship with you. So I do think it'll require both more American commitment, unleashing our warfighters on the ground and from the air, and then also using that commitment to leverage others to be really on the front lines with us. If we really think the black flag of ISIS and the caliphate is the threat that everyone says it is, which it is, then we'd better be able to show the resolve and willingness to defeat it. So I think Donald Trump showing a little bit more of his hand of what he would do there will be helpful. But I do think he's also right. You don't tell the enemy everything you're going to do because then they prepare for it. So it's you got to fight total war. And so far we've been tap dancing.
You got to be unpredictable. Look,
Yep.
I'm on the radio 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. I've asked this question to many people. You gave the best answer in 90 seconds that I've heard. Trump needs to have you. After everybody buys your book, you need to be advising Donald Trump. We're out of time. In the Arena, great read. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere you want. Follow Pete on Twitter at Pete Hegseth. Pete is a Fox News contributor and just wrote a great book, In the Arena. Graduated from Princeton, did multiple theaters of war. Pete, good to have you with us, man. It's always an honor to have you.
John, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
All right, we'll have you back. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Stay with us.